VoltCon. What do you guys think about VoltCon so far? Fun? Good day? All right. My goodness, that trailer or that teaser concept
I
thing
know,
was
but
really
we'll just
cool.
go home now because you know the VoltCon's over.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks for not leaving yet, because you're one of the handful of people who's here for the Dairugger panels. So thank you for being here.
I've been looking forward to this all year, Greg.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. Don't
All right.
disappoint me, Greg.
All right, so thank you. So you know who we are by now, I hope.
Yeah, who are you?
Who are you? What do you want? Anyway, I'm Greg. This is Shannon. And there's another name on here, Mark Morrell, of course, who could not be here, but he hopefully will be able to connect tomorrow morning, or tomorrow midday for a panel. Yes. So we're going to talk about Dairugger, and if you've not seen Dairugger, the title of this panel is what the leader of the Rugger team shouts right before the vehicles combine into Dairugger. So instead of saying, let's form Voltron, he yells, Dairugger Fighting Formation On. So there we go. That's right.
You're sitting there going, what? That's Japanese English, or
Yeah. So what is Armored Fleet Dairugger 15? There it is in Japanese, and I cannot translate any of that. So fortunately, Wikipedia said that it's the words you see out there to the right. But it's also known as all those various alternative titles that are all variations on a theme. It is, as we all know, a mecha anime series produced by Toei. There, according to Wikipedia and the Japanese version of Wikipedia, there are 56 episodes of the show. 52 regular episodes and 4 recap episodes. I have never seen them. I know nothing about them except that they are apparently recap episodes. So the show was released weekly on Wednesdays from March 3rd, 1982 to March 23rd, 1983. It was immediately preceded, and I mean the very week before, by the final episode of Beast King Go Lion, and it was immediately followed the very week after by Lightspeed Electroid All Vegas in Japan. So it seemed that Wednesdays were Mecha Anime Day. But the story is distinct from any other of the Toei programs, including Go Lion. So the melding of Go Lion and Dairugger happened during Voltron, during that adaptation. What is Vehicle Team Voltron? A super robot in 52 of the 124 episodes of Voltron Defender of the Universe, and also the special they did at the end called Fleet of Doom. The entire program, so a lot of people say, I like the Lion Voltron show, I like the Vehicle Voltron show. As a syndication package, as a production entity, it was one show. So they just had different chapters, I guess you could say. It was released each weekday, Monday through Friday, although in some markets I've heard that some episodes were aired over weekends. The 52 Vehicle Team episodes were adapted from Dairugger's 52 regular episodes. Clips from Dairugger were also featured in many of the Lion Force Voltron episodes, as had been mentioned, I think Bob had mentioned, in part to fill for time, as they cut out a lot of material that was not appropriate for U.S. children to watch. Basically, the entire concept of the Galaxy Alliance and the Galaxy Garrison came straight from Dairugger. There was none of that in Go Lion. So anytime they cut back to the Galaxy Garrison, doing their thing, sitting around the table and talking and doing nothing, that was from Dairugger.
Wasn't there a Pidge and the Pidge adjacent were like related and they sent like letters to each other?
That was all done through clever Voltron editing and scripting. So.
Right. And leading to that point, one of the things that Greg and I talked about when we were putting this panel together is why 2 different Voltron robots.
Yeah.
And
You want to speak to that?
thank you. As you were talking about, Lion Force and Vehicle Force were edited together to operate concurrently, with Vehicle Force being in charge of the near universe, which meant near Earth, and Lion Force, the far universe, farthest away from Earth. Fleet of Doom illustrated that both of the Voltrons had a significant amount of travel time to head to a particular base called Acro, which kind of implies that it was sort of toward the Middleverse, but that wasn't exactly stated outright. And the last part that's of interest is there were occasional references in Vehicle Voltron that they would refer to Zarkon as an ally or somebody that they worked with in the far universe. It was kind of, depending on which episode you're watching, it's kind of a little nebulous, but sometimes it sounded like he might have been a rebel that broke away, that they were kind of tolerating because he was at least taking more empire, that sort of thing. Is there anything very specific you remember on that one?
The most direct reference is that last bullet there. There's an episode of Lion Force called Summit Meeting, which has a scene taken entirely from Dairugger, where Drool Marshal Kizor describes Voltron as the Drool Empire's associate in the Danubian galaxy. And he mentions that Zarkon had never tried to find planets for the Drool's overcrowded galaxy. So he was out there, and in a later episode of the Lion Force, I remember them talking about basically Zarkon needing help, and the Drool Empire is like, bah, he's never helped us, why should we help him?
Exactly.
Which helps to explain why the characters never were seen in the same shot, because they were in different areas and didn't want to help each other out. So the premise of the show it's very similar, Dairugger versus Vehicle Team Voltron. From here on, all the stuff on the left with the Dairugger logo in the top left is pertinent to Dairugger, and the stuff on the right is pertinent to Voltron. So it's kind of interesting to show them, to compare and contrast. So in Dairugger, it's the year 2200, and the Rugger team, their number one goal is to build a map of the galaxy and to find habitable worlds for colonization. They encounter the Galveston Empire, and they fight. When confronted by the Galveston's battle machines, the Rugger team combines their Rugger machines into Dairugger. Voltron is very similar, however, it's set in the 25th century. I have an asterisk there because that century was never actually established in the show proper, but rather in the very first pilot episode and in some of the promotional materials. So in the 25th century, asterisk, the Vehicle Voltron team, their mission, the two objectives of their mission had basically equal footing. They were trying to find habitable worlds for colonization and find more friendly planets to join the Galaxy Alliance. So the star map thing really wasn't a big thing. It wasn't as big a focus, but finding worlds for colonization was a bigger focus for them. The Drools were the villains in Voltron, and instead of battle machines, the term we all know, robeasts, they fought, and of course the vehicles formed Voltron. So the TLDR for all this, I sort of was thinking of this through. It's like West European sea exploration, but in space, with kids that fly combat ships that form a big robot and fight an ever-present enemy. So it's a whole bunch of stuff smushed together. But I even a lot of the names of characters, especially among the Galvestons, are reminiscent of Western explorers and conquerors.
Does the sea exploration idea come from the theme song?
In part, yes, certainly, because you see the sailing ships at the beginning of the opening credits, and they talk about.
Because the beginning of the song,
Yeah.
I was reading the lyrics. It's about young people going to sea.
Yes, absolutely. So the good guys all work under, in Dairugger it's called the Triplanetary Alliance, in Voltron it's called the Galaxy Alliance. You can see in the logo there that I tried to recreate, that you see on a lot of their uniforms and things of that sort. You see the three solid white circles there. I'm assuming that those, and they're unified by that ring, that represents the alliance of three worlds, Earth, Mira, and Sala. Its relevance to the Galaxy Alliance is nebulous, but that's the gist of it in Dairugger.
Right. One thing I really liked about how that was established very, very quickly in the first episode of Dairugger is they said basically in the exchange between the two characters on the bridge, I'll tell you what their names are in a second, they established what's our mission, who's the two planets that we're affiliated with, boom, boom, boom. I was like,
Yeah,
if I didn't already know that, there it was.
they set it very quickly. Yes, absolutely. What is Earth like in these shows? In Dairugger, I mean, it's the same basic thing. The term Galaxy Garrison is directly lifted from Dairugger as their exploratory and arguably militaristic arm. that is in space. So I mean, the visuals come straight from Dairugger. So you know, there's the Galaxy Garrison logo right there, and so that was taken straight from there. The other planets, Mira is the name of the planet, one of the two other planets in the Triplanetary Alliance from Dairugger, the native planet of the Mirans, which includes characters that we'll dive into a little bit more later. But Keats is the leader of the Searugger team in this show. Crick is the character in Voltron, and as well as Cinda from Voltron, who's called Moya Kyrgios in Dairugger. The Mirans have some level of clairvoyant capability. The planet Hydra came from the pilot episode of Voltron. That term is not used in the regular episodes of the series, but it is used in the Panache Place retail catalog when they talk about the figures that never got released. Crick is described as being from the planet Hydra. So, you know, it lived a little bit beyond the pilot. But anyway, it's just called a water world or a water planet in Voltron. The third of the planets in the Triplanetary Alliance is called Sala, and that's the home world of folks such as, in the Voltron world, Willow and Tangor, but in Dairugger, Shota Cruz and Slutikats. They're tall, they've got the short hairdos, and have the bluish skin there. There's not a whole lot known about them, really, but you see them, quite a few of them, throughout the show. You don't see very many of the Mirans. In fact, I think it's just the Crick character, the Cinda character, and I think one other, and that's it in the whole show, except for a photograph, which back there there's some characters in those photographs there, but that's about it. And the planet that Willow and Tangor are from in Voltron is never named, but it's described in the first episode, or one of the early episodes, as having 7 moons, and that's just about all that we ever learned about them. The ship, that's the mothership of the Voltron Force, or the Rugger team. In Dairugger, it's called the Rugger Guard, and in Voltron, it's called the Stellar Ship Explorer. Basically, it's the same. You know, the mission we already talked about, the mission of the Galaxy Alliance, focusing more on the star map in the Dairugger world versus finding planets that they can colonize in the Voltron world. There's a large, I mean, the ship is huge. It's got the hangar bay that houses all 15 of the Rugger machines, or the Voltron vehicles. It's basically, it has a very large crew and a whole bunch of different facilities. Crew people include, this is an interesting contrast between Dairugger and Voltron. The person you see at the top in Dairugger is the overall commander of the ship. He is in charge of everything. And whereas in Voltron, the person at the bottom is in charge of everything. Captain Dick Asimov, obviously, you know, if you're into science fiction, you may get a reference there to somebody. He's in charge of everything, and his subordinate there, Shinji Issei, is specifically the captain of the Rugger team. So in the Voltron world, the highest ranked officer is Commander Hawkins at the bottom, and his first officer and pilot is Captain Newley. And yes, Captain and Commander are kind of wonky compared to U.S. Navy ranks and things of that sort. But anyway, other crew members. I'm going to speed up a little bit because we started a bit late. But Dr. Search, Professor Page, was the resident scientist on the ship. He had an assistant who was not named in Dairugger, but called Debbie in Voltron. And then, of course, you have the chef there, who had at least 2 different names, as I've been able to see. Consistency was not always there in Voltron. There's Dairugger, or Vehicle Team Voltron. It's the big robot made of 15 smaller vehicles, operated by 15 pilots. The Voltron robot was said to have been created by Dr. Loring, as Shannon alluded to in the Origins presentation. We don't really learn anything about where Dairugger came from, but presumably it was just built by Galaxy or Triplanetary Alliance engineers. Weapons of the robot included the blazing sword in Voltron terms, or the Dairugger sword in Dairugger itself, the spin cutters or Dairugger kilders, which in Voltron were called the spinning laser blades, and then an assortment of other weapons that had different names. We can spin through a lot of those. One of my favorites is that one at the bottom there because it's so colorful. I mean, you know, the Miracle Beam in Dairugger, or the Electro Thermal Blast. It looks cool.
Yes.
Okay, I did put a slide in here at Shannon's suggestion about the power source of Voltron. A lot of people ask about this because one of the few things people seem to remember about this robot is that it can only operate for 5 minutes. Now, I have a theory about where that idea came from among the writers, but there's no way to confirm that since Jameson Brewer, who wrote that episode, is no longer around to ask. But basically, Dairugger, we don't know what powered it. We don't know if it had any limits. It probably didn't. I believe that the 5-minute limit was invented to create tension in the very first episode of Vehicle Team Voltron. It was referenced a couple other times in the episodes, but many, many more times the robot was seen to operate more than 5 minutes. I wrote a ridiculously researched article about it in my website, lionsandpilotsandbots.com. So, you know, take it for what you will. I like to think that maybe they gradually upgraded it over time and gave it more and more longevity. All right, the characters, you know, they got the 15 pilots, the 3 sub-teams. It's the same with Dairugger versus Voltron. The big difference is that the Rugger team at the start of the show had no combat experience, whereas the Voltron force had been fighting Hazar for quite a while. In fact, they weren't super surprised to encounter Hazar's attack fleet in the very first episode because they'd already encountered and beaten him before.
Right, and so right out of the gate, it makes a huge tonal difference in the two series once you take both from beginning to end.
Yes.
The fact that they don't have any experience versus the fact that they do.
Mm-hmm. There is no origin episode of the Vehicle Team, whereas the Dairugger inherently has an origin. I mean, they're already on their mission, but everything changes in the first episode. They take a left turn and go from just exploring to now having to deal with this new threat. And in Dairugger, the 3 planets, Earth, Mira, and Sala, only knew about each other and had no knowledge of any other life forms anywhere in the galaxy. So encountering the Galvestons was a huge shock. So here we go with the 3 sub-teams. The Aki team, named after Manabu Aki, their chief. It's more formally called the Air Rugger team. And of course, the Voltron is just the air team. They combine into the fighter there called the Stratofighter in Voltron, or the Air Rugger in Dairugger. We've got the Keats team or Sea Rugger team, and in Voltron, of course, the Sea team. And we got the Aqua Fighter versus the Sea Rugger. And then the Walter team or Land Rugger team, they form the Land Rugger, or in Voltron, the Turbo Terrain Fighter. So there are 15 pilots. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because there are so many of them. I wish I could, but we are at what already?
4:31 if your clock is right.
Yeah, we're already halfway through our allotted
Can
window.
you send that to me?
What's that?
So I can see all of
Yes,
what
the
you
slides
guys-
will be made available somehow to be determined.
Yes!
But yes. Basically, they have similar personalities here, but just a few differences in their backstory. There's not a whole lot known about either of them, but Aki has at least one sibling, and we don't know really much of anything about Jeff's background. Shinobu Kai or Rocky, they're both very similar in temperament and all that. They fly the same ship. Wolo they both had a similar backstory because they used the same animation for the same episode. A difference is that in Dairugger, Shota Cruz's brother actually died saving him from this monster on their homeworld, whereas in Voltron, his brother lived. And that's pretty much the only distinction between the two of them. Mutsu, Yasuo Mutsu, also known as Chip, no relation to the Go Lion character in Dairugger because they were completely separate stories. But in Voltron, Chip is Pidge's twin brother, presumably a fraternal twin.
Yeah, because they don't look the same, and we do know that they have one younger sister from a Lion Force episode throwaway. But yeah, so I'd say fraternal too.
Yeah.
Glasses and neck.
Yes, and Pidge was said to have been from a planet called Balto, and presumably Chip is as well, although we don't know that for sure. It was never flat out stated.
We do. The only other fact that we do know, and I know that we're short of time, is we know that they were adopted together because in the Letters from Home episode, the note from Pidge makes it clear that I said to our adopted parents, I wouldn't let them take me if they didn't also take you.
Yeah.
So
Mutsu and Chip both deal with insecurity. They're very young. Mutsu looks forward to letters from his mother. Chip looks forward to letters from his mother, and of course from Pidge. Moving on, Patty Ellington in Dairugger is also known as Ginger in Voltron. Ginger actually has a backstory, a bit of a backstory that she didn't have at all in Dairugger. There was she has this trauma from her childhood by seeing some kind of an exploding spacecraft. It was meant to explain a visual clip in an episode. It's just written to cover it. It was really her. The ship, if you look closely, is actually the Explorer, or the Rugger Guard. She's fearful that her ship, which in that point in the episode has a bomb stuck to it, might be destroyed if she were to land in the ship. But in this, they established that she had seen some spacecraft explode and it caused her some kind of trauma in childhood. There's Keats, also known as Crick. They both have precognitive abilities. It is suggested very strongly in one episode that Keats has some kind of royal title. He's referred to as Your Highness in an episode where he's looking at photos from his home world. There's a female Mirren in that scene who asks him a question and says Your Highness at the end of the question, which is interesting. All we really know about Crick is that his father owns at least one hydroponic farm. Just another little background detail. Haruka Kaga and Lisa, same personality traits in both stories. There's a little bit of backstory that Lisa is not from Earth. She's a human, but not from Earth, which kind of helps to expand the scope of the Galaxy Alliance in Voltron. Salute to Katz, or Tangor, similar personality traits again. He's one of the least featured of the 15, but seems like a nice guy. Tatsuo Izumo or Shannon, both of them have a similar growth as a character in an episode where they meet in Voltron Drool in Dairugger Galveston. They overcome their hatred of their enemy to form a lasting friendship. Well, it would have lasted, except that in Dairugger that character dies. But anyway, the last character is one who has just a teeny tiny number of lines, and I think that's a shame. Barros Karatea, or Zandy in Voltron. He does have lines, but not very many. Very little is known about him in either of the shows. All right, still got several characters to cover and not much time to do it in. Walter Jack, or Cliff, they have different backstories. One thing that's kind of funny is in Dairugger, he pursues magic as a hobby and wants to become a member of the Magic Castle in Hollywood.
And that is very funny to me because I have several friends who are professional animation writers who are members of the Magic Castle. So when I found out that, I said, is this for real? I looked it up. Yep.
That is fun. I didn't know it was real. That's cool.
It's a real place, yes.
But they both have a brother named Jimmy. So there you go. I assume they had access to the Dairugger script when they wrote the scene where that was established. Cliff has an interesting accent that I believe is supposed to be Australian. It's never flat out stated in the show, but I think it is called out in that Panache Place retailer catalog as a little detail about him. Moya Kirigas, or Cinda, they both have precognitive abilities and love nature. That's pretty much all we know about her. She does seemingly have a close tie with Crick or Keats. They seem to hang out together a lot. Mac Chucker, or Modoc, big guy, pragmatic, likes to explore caves and get bitten by alien bats. Not much known about him. Tasuku Izu, or Marvin, again, similar personality traits. He's a good buddy of the other foot of Voltron, which we'll get to here. Kazuto Nagato, or Hutch, they're buddies. They bicker a lot, but there's not a whole lot known about them. I kind of think of them as like Felix and Oscar in the audio, you know. The Galveston Empire, or the Drool Empire, they're a newly discovered threat in Dairugger. They're a well-known threat in Voltron. Both sides are in both shows are militaristic and interpret the Galaxy Garrison's advances as a hostile act, basically. The Galveston Empire, it's not basically the home world of both of the species is under threat of destruction, but for differing reasons. But again, the reasons are not entirely relevant, but they're a little different between the two shows. In my mind, this character is the central character in Dairugger by far, and I find it easily the most interesting character. Commander Sokrat Teles, and you might notice that is looking kind of similar to Socrates. You'll see an even closer name very shortly. Commander Hazar is his name in Voltron. He's a well-known villain in the Voltron world, and the high points of his story match those of Tellus, so we'll talk about that real quick. Although he was initially unknown to the people of Earth, he focuses on survival, the survival of his people. So he's very pragmatic and is willing to work with Earth to find a new planet, but his sole goal is to save his people from the destruction of the pending destruction of the homeworld. They do eventually find a fleet, Earth and the Galvestons, Tellus, working together. However, the Galveston military, the Galaxy Alliance wants the Galvestons to demilitarize, and they won't. And so that does not work so well. Tellus refuses to force Earth off that planet, but Galveston places him under house arrest. And he eventually leads a guerrilla attack against the leaders of Galveston, overthrows the leaders of the Empire, and surrenders to Earth unconditionally. And they help to rescue his people. However, his fate in Dairugger is very different from what it is in Voltron. In Voltron, his fate is quite different. Spoiler, he escapes the planet and goes to the new world. That may not be entirely the same in Dairugger. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, let's just say, as much as Steve said earlier today, that a lot of stuff was pulled from Dairugger to cover certain things in the other show. There's a reason why we have a lot of flashbacks in the final episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The overall ruler of the Galveston Empire is Emperor Corsair, also known as Zeppo in Voltron. He's just kind of he wants to take over and do bad things and trash the Galaxy Alliance and all that stuff. So there's not a whole lot that is different between the two, except again, their fates are very likely different. Hint, hint, hint. Zeppo escapes with other Drool leaders in Voltron to a new planet. That may not be what happens to him in Voltron, or in Dairugger. Another individual with a different fate, Supreme Commander Al Caponero.
Oh, not so subtle.
No, not so subtle. Viceroy Throck in Voltron. Again, very pro-war, militaristic, wants to destroy Earth rather than work with it. He, like Zeppo in Voltron, escapes to the new planet, to their new planet, which is not the same planet that Hazar and the other Drools go to. His fate might be different than in Dairugger than it is in Voltron.
Well, actually, this is a case where we do know a little bit about the differing in fates, because if the name might ring a bell to you if you've seen Fleet of Doom, it is actually Viceroy Throck who reaches out to Zarkon.
Yes.
To the team up.
That's true. There are a ton of Drools / Galvestons. We are not going to go through them all. I'll show them all to you, but I'm not going to give a lot of details because there's just no time. Captain Drake is a notable one. He's called Mongo in Voltron. He starts out being pro-war, becomes a friend of Hazar. So there's Socrates, that's Tellus' father. Mozak is Hazar's father. Again, he supports finding a new planet and supports his son's approach to doing so. Other significant Drools, Galvestons or Drools, include Cirque, who is an adjutant who's assigned to Tellus in Dairugger, and she joins the rebellion against the Galveston Emperor. She's called Dorma in Voltron, and she's Hazar's sister in Voltron. There's no relation in Dairugger. They're not related to one another. The fellow down there at the bottom is Baki in both. He's a rebel, basically a rebel who wants to overthrow the Emperor. Sim or Sandu is probably the most well-known of the non-leader Drools or Galvestons. He has a similar story in both, except his fate might be different in Dairugger. You might be noticing a pattern. And Antonov or Antor in Voltron, another young Galveston or Drool who befriends the rubber team or the Voltron force. I'm going to quickly go through these because there are a ton of commanders of the week, or weekday in Voltron's case. Here we go, still going. Okay, we're at the end. Yay, we made it. Okay. So in Dairugger, the giant robotic thingies were called battle machines. They're called robies. In Voltron, and they basically serve the same story function. My favorite Dairugger episodes are the first episode where they first encounter the Galvestons. It sets up the premise very effectively. Good stuff. A Momentary Truce is good. This is the episode where they meet the young pilot Sim, who in Voltron is called Sandu. It's my favorite episode, vehicle team episode of Voltron as well. Several good episodes that I do strongly recommend that you check out. I don't know that I need to go through every one of these, but those are some strongly recommended episodes. Episodes Dairugger versus Voltron. The vehicle, so you may have noticed in Shannon's presentation this morning, we were throwing around these episode numbers like 100 in this, 200 in that, 300 in that. Internally at World Events Productions, the 52 episodes adapted from Dairugger were 101 through 152. And 101 was the adaptation of Dairugger episode 1. There's a pattern there. And the 200 episodes, 201 through 252, were adapted from Go Lion 1 through 52. And then 301 through 321 were the 20 episodes that were originally animated for Voltron and were not adapted. And why are there 21 numbers when there are only 20 episodes? Episode 318,
318, yeah.
was never finished. So they skipped the number. And in one of the DVDs from Media Blasters, they have the visual footage from that episode. But the script is not known as far as I'm aware.
Let's put it this way, from a professional level, from having worked in animation, the amount it would have cost them for retakes to fix 318 would have been probably the cost of another episode, and you really didn't do retakes in the 80s.
Yeah. So, interestingly or not, the original air dates of the Voltron episodes did not air in the same sequence as the Dairugger counterparts. So Dairugger ran straight through 1 through 52 in order. Everything works beautifully. Same with the Go Lion, by the way. But for both the Lion Force and Vehicle Team episodes of Voltron Defender of the Universe, the episodes aired out of sequence relative to the anime. So continuity glitches creep in here and there. There's some inconsistencies here and there. It just comes with the territory. The next slide is because I love to make graphs. So the blue line you see there is what the episodes would have been like if they'd aired in the same sequence as Dairugger. That really bumpy line that you see with all the little data points is the sequence they actually aired in. So the Dairugger sequence is the vertical axis, the Voltron sequence is the horizontal axis. You can see that the last episode, Voltron episode 52, aired pretty early in the sequence. That last data point all the way to the right, how low it is, it actually aired originally pretty early in the sequence of the show. Why? No idea. So basically, this is just touching on what I just said. It's impossible to know the real narrative sequence of any of either the Lion Force or Vehicle Team episodes of Voltron because they were adapted out of order. I have been privileged enough to have access to all of the scripts from Defender of the Universe to review them on the podcast, and I can tell you that the shooting order, or the recording dates are out of sequence as well. Production numbers are, it is probably a typical thing in animation in general, but when you compound the fact that they were adapted from a pre-made show, it makes things a little tough to figure out.
And I, from a production point, find it very interesting from what Steve was saying, that even though he came in second and got the majority of the Lion episodes, it was a batch of the Lion episodes we got first, even though they were numbered in the 200s.
Yes.
So yeah, there's all kinds of things. You have for the bookkeeping and the accounting normally dictates the numbers, and yeah.
So my hunch on that is that Franklin began working on the vehicle episodes because if you look at all the earliest promotional material for Voltron, the vehicle robot is shown exclusively in the earliest promotional material. So my guess is that Franklin was beginning to work on the vehicle episodes, and then whenever that realization happened that the Lion concept was going to be a bigger success, they probably switched over to the Lion episodes, and when they ran out of runway because they had started producing them later, They did that weird cut over to the vehicle for a while, for several episodes, and then continued with the Lion shows. That's my guess, but
Mine
who's to
too,
say?
actually.
Yeah. So, moving on, I'm not gonna read all this, I promise. There is an interesting quirk with Voltron, and it is that the last 3 episodes seem to be the 51st episode, the 52nd episode, and then the 46th. In the 52nd episode, that's the last Dairugger episode, adapted from that, the Drools escape from the Galaxy Alliance, helps the Drools escape their homeworld and go to a new planet. Emperor Zeppo, Viceroy Throck, and other Drool leaders also escape to their own different planet. And in this episode, it could be a long war, they overtake Hazar's planet. And this, basically, there's no definitive end to the Voltron narrative if this sequence is indeed true. And I don't see, and the order in which the episodes were recorded does follow this sequence, 151, 152, and 146. So I do want to, at some point in time, try to go back through the Voltron episodes and try to figure out the most logical narrative order. As you might guess, that would be rather difficult to do. But the 146 does seem to be the last episode, and unfortunately, it does sort of take some of the feeling of resolution out of the show. To right after the show, where the Drools have escaped, to hear that Zeppo and Throck have now conquered the brand new planet that Hazar and the Peaceful Drools have just settled. But I would strongly suggest you guys to check out those 3 episodes in that order, especially if you've recently rewatched those episodes, in production order. I think it might be an interesting thing to see. Hazar is mentioned throughout that last episode. It could be a long war, but he's not seen because his character was not in the original Dairugger episode. And all of the footage of Zeppo and the other Drool leaders like Throck were edited in from other episodes. So they weren't even in that episode. It is a bit of a clunky episode to go through because of what they're trying to establish in the story versus the material that they have to work with, but it works. It works. Things I happen to like about Dairugger. This is kind of a repetition of what I presented last year about Voltron, which is I love the large scale. You've got this, as much as I love the Lion Force and Go Lion, they spend, for all that they're called the defenders of the universe, they spend most of their time on one planet, Eris, defending the Castle of Lions. They're not really getting out very much beyond that. Whereas in this show, the very nature of the show, the very premise, has them on all different planets doing a variety of things. There are a lot of high stakes in Dairugger and the vehicle episodes. And it is interesting to see the dynamics, the political dynamics internally in the military of the Galaxy Alliance, and also with the Drool or Galveston empires. It is more of an epic story. Whether you like it more or less, that's fine. But I do think there are some things that make it unique and interesting. Less than stellar aspects. Do they choose plot over character? We spun through a lot of the Rugger team and Voltron Force characters, and there's a lot that we don't know about a lot of members of those teams. And I would say the same of many of the villains. Is it because there are too many characters? I don't know. But I do think that they definitely focus on the big picture plot rather than on the smaller scale, more personal stories. So you do not get to know these characters to the degree that you do with the Lion Force or the Go Lion characters. So, how can you watch these shows today? Dairugger, as far as I'm aware, as of just a few weeks ago, is available on the Bondi Spirits YouTube channel with English subtitles for the first 48 episodes.
Yes.
For some reason, the last 4 are missing their subtitles. I do not know why.
Third DVD is hard to find.
What's that?
That third DVD is hard to find, hundreds of dollars.
It is ridiculously expensive now. The out-of-print DVDs by Media Blasters in the mid-2000s, my goodness. Yeah, Volume 3 is crazy expensive. As for Voltron, the DVDs that were out in the mid-2000s were the first remastered versions. You can buy them again, that set of all the episodes that came out. You could get it at Walmart as recently as maybe a year ago. You can still find them very affordably today. You can find many of the episodes online through the Voltron channel and Retro Bytes channels and other licensed YouTube channels. So you can watch both shows if you look. I do wish they had the subtitles for those last 4 Dairugger episodes though. That's all that I have except for 2 trivia questions. So instead of just the one, because we talked about Dairugger and Voltron, I got a couple. In Dairugger, which character is named after a science fiction author?
Asimov.
Correct. Nice job. And in Voltron, Voltron's blazing sword is formed when Voltron presses together which of its other weapons?
Spinning
Laser
laser
blades.
blades.
Okay, I do not know who's first. You guys can find it out if you like.
I heard him first.
Badges for all of you. Badges for everyone. Seriously. Did you have any comments, questions? I blew through that. I didn't
No,
even look over at you.
That's
I'm
why,
so sorry.
that's why I stuck in where I
Okay.
felt it was applicable.
All right.
We good.
Any questions? Comments?
So is Rugger Teams actually related to rugby?
So as Patrick mentioned
Because that
earlier
was,
today.
yeah, I mentioned that before.
Yeah, I didn't mention it because I was thinking purely in terms of the lore of the show. But yes, they're called the Rugger team because rugby teams have 15 players. And so, hey, I guess you got to get your name from somewhere.
Dairugger would be,
Dai is a common Japanese prefix for gigantic robots. It's
giant rugby team.
well, I don't know that it's giant. It might be godlike, and I don't mean in a religious sense, but in terms of being enormously powerful. Because the emperor of Galra in Golion is Dai Bazal. So there are different robots in anime that have that Dai Atlas and various other things. So I think it's just really big or powerful thing made of 15 pieces, maybe. Hard to say.
Giant rugby team. Got it.
Giant rugby team. I like you said it already. All right. Any other questions, comments? Liz?
In Japanese history and culture, the dai represents the emperor, so they always add that as a prefecture. So when they always say that, when they are mentioning the emperor, they always use dai. So it's a prefecture of royalty and connected to the higher powers of that. So that's what that refers to.
Thank you for answering that question and knowing the answer to that question. That's awesome. Anybody else?
Giant godlike rugby team.
There we go. Well, thank you for thanks for being here and taking part. It looks like we have a battle android trooper who's about to take the stage, which means I gotta run off here. Right?
Yep, you gotta connect with this group right in front of us from
Yes,
Viking.
badges for everybody. Please stick around here. Thank you.
Oh, I have ribbons if anybody wants them.
Oh,
Yeah.